Good evening, everyone. We are about to get started. My name is Tanya Cantlow, and I am the acting counsel to Brooklyn Borough President Eric L. Adams. To my right, I have Ina Gusenfeld, who is the land use coordinator. And to the far end, we have Richard Barrick, who is the land use director. And of course, we have our borough president to my left, Brooklyn Borough President Eric L. Adams.
Thank you, Tanya and Richard, the entire team, actually. If we could just take a moment of silence. We lost another detective today who also appeared to have taken his own life. We had an incident yesterday where we had a chief who also took his life, it appeared. And so if we could just, start off with a moment of silence in remembrance of them and their family. Thank you very much. Richard is going to read our opening. Richard?
Okay. There is one item on the agenda this evening. Borough President Adams' goal is to ensure that the community members have a public say about proposals that impact their neighborhoods. Borough President Adams also feels that it's important to balance the critical values of free speech with public safety, as a large crowd is expected. Tonight, we cannot guarantee that all attendees will be able to sit in on the hearing room at this time. In order to accommodate the public to the extent practical, this hearing is being simulcast into the community room and into the Borough President's conference room. The community room and conference room are both located on the first floor. This simulcast will be further supplemented so that we would ask that those who are watching but not speaking, please observe the hearing from the first floor conference room or the first floor community room to allow speakers access to the podium when their names are called. Those who arrive later but not signed up to speak will be directed to overflow spaces as required. We ask those who have already testified to follow the hearing into the spaces where it is being simulcast so that later speakers can make their way to the courtroom. We anticipate a large number of speakers for tonight's hearing. In order to reduce the expected wait time, we are limiting speakers' remarks to 2 minutes. To ensure smooth flow of speakers and maximize the number of people who are able to testify, we ask that the audience refrain from applauding or commenting after each speaker. We hope to avoid any delays that would prevent anyone signed up from testifying or to leave people to leave this building before they've had their opportunity to have their name called. It's important for that, so Borough President Adams wants all speakers to have the opportunity to be heard. This hearing will be available for viewing on Borough President Adams' website, brooklyn-usa.org, or on the One Brooklyn channel on YouTube. For those wishing to provide longer testimony as well as for web viewers, Borough President Adams welcomes having these comments submitted to Ask Eric at brooklynbp.nyc.gov throughout the month of June. I'm going to call the first item, and we're going to...
Before you do that, thank you, Richard. And Richard and both Ina, they have been really looking over this project, and they have done an amazing job of trying to keep our office informed. And it's important tonight, our goal, as Richard indicated, is to hear from as many of the residents as possible. And that is why we do have that 2-minute clock. So I'm asking you to look at the clock so to keep your comments within the 2-minute period, because the goal is to respect our neighbors and give them an opportunity to speak as well. I have several other things to do throughout the borough, but I'm going to be briefed by Richard and his team on the outcome of these hearings so that we could, further evaluate how we're going to move forward on this conversation. This is one of many challenging topics in the borough and throughout the entire city. Only way we get through these conversations is to engage in very rich and real dialogue, and my goal is to always do that. And so it is important that we cooperate together so we can get to a conclusion and a full understanding as we move forward on this topic at hand.
Okay, we're acknowledging that there'll be representatives from the governor and State Senator Selman at Montgomery be here, and representatives from the mayor's office are all here for the hearing as well. And I'm just going to call the calendar item number 1, 190116, MMK 190333, PSY 190334, ZRY, and 190339, ZSK.
These applications submitted by the Department of Correction with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services include one that would facilitate site selection of 4 properties, including 275 Atlantic Avenue and Brooklyn Community District 2 for borough-based jail facilities. A second application proposes an amendment to the city map involving the elimination, discontinuance, and closing of subsurface areas beneath the level of public utilities and another envelope starting a few stories above the road section of State Street between Borum Place and Smith Street. The third application establishes a new borough-based jail system special permit in the New York City zoning resolution that allows variation from the zoning resolution to enable modifications to floor area ratio requirements, height and setback requirements, permitted parking and loading berth requirements, and transparency requirements. The fourth application would be to seek to achieve zoning bulk modifications for the proposed borough-based jail facility at 275 Atlantic Avenue according to the proposed special bulk permit. Community Board 2 does not have an official position at this time. Borough President Adams will hold off on making any decisions until he has more opportunity to hear from the board. We will now begin calling speakers on this application. As a reminder, each speaker will have 2 minutes to testify. To accommodate all who wish to speak, speakers should limit testimony to the allotted time, and audience members should refrain from applause or comments. In order to minimize wait time for these seeking to testify that would not be given the opportunity until much later into the hearing, we also ask that organizations with several members designate a single speaker to provide their testimony rather than duplicate remarks. Once testimony has been given, speakers should make their way downstairs to the community room or the conference room so that those who are waiting to speak may proceed to the courtroom. There are several staff members in the room who will assist you in this process.
So I'm going to call out the speakers.
And if the courtroom stays vacant or partially full like this, feel free to stay here. Only if the place gets full to the capacity and others need to come in. But if it stays at this level, feel free to stay here.
Okay, Dana Kaplan, Deputy Director from the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, followed by Brenda Cook, Chief of Staff, Department of Corrections, followed by Darren Mark, be the first speakers. And all speakers called could come up and sit nearby to keep this thing moving. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Borough President, for hosting this important hearing. I'm Dana Kaplan, Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. I'm here to briefly speak about the plan to close the jails on Rikers Island. To start off, central to this discussion is the moral imperative to close Rikers, a call which has been coming from advocates, community members, and formerly incarcerated people since before the mayor took office. This plan is fundamentally a decarceration effort to dramatically reduce the number of people affected by the criminal justice system. We intend to reduce the jail capacity by 2/3 and more than 9,000 beds. We believe this is the largest shrinking of a city jail system in U.S. history. The plan will close all 11 active jails in New York City and build 4 modern and humane borough-based facilities. In light of bail reform and other recently passed legislation, we are now planning for an even smaller population of only 4,000 people in detention on a given day, down from over 7,500 today, over 11,000 when the mayor took office, and more than 22,000 people in the 1990s. Our plan calls for closing all existing jails in New York City and building a smaller, safer, and more just system. Specifically, in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn House of Detention would be demolished, and a newer facility with smaller housing units, ample programming space, Better outdoor recreation and improved visiting areas would be designed and built. That facility would have capacity for no more than 1,150 beds. The ULURP will be amended to reflect that decreased number, which has come down as a result of bail reform. We recognize that in this process of closing Rikers, we must also transform the culture of the city's detention facilities, which DOC will further address. And we are also committed to a continued community engagement process to determine further opportunities for community input and neighborhood investments, and to continue to address neighborhood considerations about we understand that that is a key concern. We can do all of these things at the same time. Right now is a historic moment in our city where we have the opportunity to lead the way on criminal justice reform and rethink justice and safety for all New Yorkers. I'm here to answer any questions that the Borough President's office might have, and of course can follow up afterwards. Thank you.
Also like to acknowledge that Councilman Levin's office is also represented. So we have Brenda Cook, followed by Darren Mack.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Brenda Cook, the Chief of Staff at the Department of Correction. I'd like to address tonight the ways that modern jail design will support the culture change at the Department of Correction. As an initial matter, please be assured that the culture change at the Department of Correction is already underway, and we will not wait for new jails to undertake that effort. Staff hiring and training and improved services and programs that meet the needs of people in detention are at the heart of our ongoing efforts to maintain safer, fairer jail facilities. Modern jails, however, will support and advance that necessary culture change. They will be specifically designed to improve safety with a direct supervision model. That's a standard in correctional operations that leads the nation. Direct supervision will provide officers unobstructed sight lines, increase safety, and reduce stress for everyone in the jail. Direct supervision design provides for shared spaces for staff and people in detention that can improve interactions between staff and people in detention. The spaces within modern jails will be designed to feel normative. That means that the furniture will feel more normal. The layouts, the available technology, the access to natural light, all of these things can be improved significantly in modern jails. The facilities will be designed to convey a sense of dignity that staff and service providers and people who are detained deserve. Modern jails will fundamentally integrate services and programs to give people the best opportunities to succeed upon release. There will be dedicated programming spaces in every housing unit in our new jails. There will be reduced idle time and improved outcomes because of this. People will be able to access outdoor recreation spaces throughout the day. They'll have access to fresh air because of that. Our leadership is committed to ongoing community engagement surrounding the plan to close
If you could sum
jails.
up. Thank you.
We're committed to ongoing community engagement and to transforming the culture of our jail facilities. And I thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
So Darren will be followed by Justin Pollock, Sandy Balboza, and Dwight Smith.
Thank you so much. My name is Darren Mack. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. At the age of 17, I was arrested for being an accomplice to a robbery, charged as an adult, and incarcerated on Rikers Island when there was 20,000 people detained there. At that time, unlike today, there was no interest, no concern, no media attention about the dehumanization and culture of violence that thousands of people like myself experienced on Rikers Island. I served 19 months of hell on that penal colony. After serving 20 years from a 20 to 40 year sentence in prison, I returned home to the city that I love and found that the culture of violence and human rights violations on Rikers still remain. That is why I got involved with the campaign to close Rikers. Rikers is a human rights crisis. It is the Abu Ghraib of New York City. Closing it is urgent and cannot be delayed. To enable the fastest possible closure of Rikers, I support the plan to go from 12 jails across our city down to 4 borough-based facilities, unlike anything we've seen before, but with important conditions that will improve the plan. Any delay or opposition to move forward with this plan is a vote to keep Rikers Island open. There are organizations and elected officials who want Rikers to stay open and even rebuild on Rikers. They have been relatively quiet because people are working to derail this decarceration plan. The idea to shrink the system, decarcerate, and put forth a justice reinvestment plan to build communities came from directly impacted people, and we want to ensure our input is reflected from now through completion. This campaign, meaning the Close Rikers campaign, in particular has gotten the furthest in securing closure of Rikers, but we recognize that people who have worked for decades to close the Rikers Island jail complex and many other leaders are still in this fight. And I'll conclude, we have to seize this moment and finally end this moral stain on our city. I urge that you support the borough-based plan, but with important conditions outlined by directly impacted leaders who have brought us closer than ever to closing Rikers Island. Thank you.
Justin Pollock.
Thank you. My name is Justin Pollock, and I live across the street from the Brooklyn Detention Complex. 4 community boards have spoken, and they have all rejected the mayor's current plan for expanding jails in the boroughs. They didn't reject the plan because they want to keep Rikers Island open. They didn't reject the plan because they don't want jails in their neighborhood either. They rejected the plan because the city has provided inadequate, conflicting, and ever-changing information on the plan. The administration has provided scant details regarding the cost, design, or space requirements of the jails. After starting the ULURP process for a 6,000-bed system, the city has announced that jails will now only house 4,000 detainees. However, they have not adjusted the ULURP application to reflect this. The city has also announced that they believe that those with mental health issues should not be housed in detention facilities. However, they have not come up with a plan to remove these beds from the current plan. Their answer when pressed is to trust us. How are we able to trust this administration and the DOC when they develop this plan in secret and continually falsify and obfuscate the crisis of violence within the jails today? How are we able to trust this administration and the DOC can change the culture of violence within the system when they can't even be transparent about this jail plan and the abuses in the current system? The city convened an advisory council of neighborhood stakeholders and elected officials to come up with guidelines and principles regarding the jail plan. In Brooklyn, they didn't share the 13-page document with the community board until just before they were prepared to vote on it. In Manhattan, when asked about the city's views on the guidelines and principles, they responded they hadn't had time to even review them. The city didn't have time to review the position of local stakeholders. Just one more example of the utter lack of respect this administration has had for the process and neighborhoods who are being asked to house these detention facilities. I urge you to reject the city's application and vote no. Tell the mayor to come back with a plan that reflects a smaller, safer, and more fair jail for Brooklyn. Come back with a plan that respects the community.
To wrap up, please.
And commits to housing as few people as necessary. Thank you.
Sandy Balboza.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for holding this hearing. I'm Sandy Balboza, representing the Atlantic Avenue Betterment Association and Advocacy Group for Atlantic Avenue from 4th Avenue to Hicks Street. The detention facility planned for Borum Hill is too big. Communities citywide are outraged by the extreme scale and height of the 4 proposed borough jails, as well as the lack of community participation in the planning stages and the rush by the city to start the ULURP process before the facts were known. In response to the flawed process and community concerns about the impacts that oversized jails would have on our neighborhoods, all 4 community boards participating in the ULURP process have voted against the city's plan to build enormous out-of-scale jails in their district. I know CB2 is still working that out a little bit. Now, in anticipation of a significant drop in the inmate population due to the criminal justice reforms recently passed in Albany, the mayor announced his intention to build smaller borough jails that will fit better with our surroundings. This is good news. However, the city has not modified its ULURP application, and no one has seen a rendering of what the smaller jails will look like, and the MOCJ has not reached out to its Neighborhood Advisory Council, the NAC. Borough President Adams reject this rezoning request because it does not reflect the reductions proposed by the mayor. Support a zoning proposal that reflects the expected smaller inmate population and a smaller jail in Borum Hill. I have a few bullet points. Maybe I can have time to say those. Moving forward, the city must first modify the application to reflect a lower inmate population and smaller building. Fully involve the surrounding communities in the planning and design process. Plan for
If you could sum up, please. Thank you.
3,500 beds or less. And I'd like to say just one more thing. Eliminate parking for 300 personal cars. Atlantic Avenue is a transit-rich area. Encourage mass transit instead. Thank you.
Okay, Dwight Smith will be followed by Shanika Fogler, Jamina Graham, and Barry Campbell.
Hey, sir. Borough President Adams, I'm a longtime Borum Hill resident and a supporter of the borough-based jail plan concept because it's humane and where implemented has proven to be an effective solution. Now, I know this is a public hearing about the consideration of a land use application, a strictly land use matter, and I urge you to reject the application as submitted. Please support instead the construction of a facility that meets today's understanding of future capacity needs, a facility built for a maximum of 800 beds with a maximum 10 FAR envelope. But I'd like to draw your attention to an equally important non-land use matter, to the implementation of one of the jail plan's reentry prevention strategies. Your hearing is the only opportunity to comment on such issues, and so I hope you'll consider them as well in your decision statement. Mr. Adams, I strongly urge you to require the jail's planned supportive programming and services to include an emphasis on literacy skills, on reading, writing, math skills, and especially reading. I raise this because I was surprised and really disappointed that the jail plan strategy 15A for, quote, productive futures for young adults, unquote, does not mention adult education programming. Strategy 15A does mention specifically a reference to vocational programming and assistance for the incarcerated who are currently enrolled in secondary programs. But these assume that everyone already has basic skills. At the hearings I attended, the need for basic literacy skills was a recurring issue raised both by former inmates and prison reform advocates. They said it's a critically unmet need at Rikers that should be incorporated into the new incarceration model. But that the jail plan's document does not speak to this suggests it isn't currently part of their strategies.
Okay,
Please
thank you.
consider those issues.
Okay, Shanika, followed by Tamika Graham and Barry Campbell.
My name is Shanika Fogler, and I was detained on Rikers Island for 22 months before going to trial. This being my only experience with jail, it is one I will never forget. I can recall the times being in a cell with temperatures over 100 degrees, taking my t-shirt off and drenching it with cold water and putting it back on, but to still have it completely dry or clammy, no more than 15 or 20 minutes later. I would ask other women for pills that cause drowsiness to try and sleep, but the humidity would not allow it. The facility was capable of providing air, but chose to preserve energy rather than human life. I have been housed with women who were clearly battling mental illness, but instead of being properly treated, they were mistreated due to their illness by being locked in their cell. No matter your condition, you know when you are being mistreated, and someone would react by expressing their frustrations by either attacking other women on the unit or spreading feces in the cells or areas that the rest of us were exposed to. Yes, they may not have been maintaining their hygiene, but that could have also been because the time was not taken to properly diagnose and treat them accordingly. I have 1,000 other stories that could support why Rikers should and must be closed now, including stories from people I work with as a service provider here in Brooklyn. But the ones I shared should be enough. As of 2018, there are 5,400 empty beds on the island, and that number is increasing. In order to keep these numbers depleting, we need to close Rikers so that a quota does not have to try and be kept with frivolous arrests such as marijuana possession, turnstile jumping, and sex work. We need to open the other facilities that hold a smaller capacity, no more than 3,000, and these facilities must be restructured with support staff, not Department of Corrections, for interaction. For women, there must be a completely separate and standalone facility where trauma-informed services are provided and transportation needs are met. Please consider I urge you to use the power as Borough President to end this suffering and support the plan with conditions, including the improvements that those of us on the Close Rikers campaign have named. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker, Tamika Graham.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamika Graham. I am formerly incarcerated. I am human. I am testifying this evening in support of the plan to go from 12 jails to 4 borough-based facilities. But I have a few conditions and changes I'd like to see to drastically improve this plan before the City Council votes on it. And I ask you, before the Borough Presidents vote on it. And I ask you to help us move this proposal forward and fight with us for these improvements. Rikers Island must be closed down immediately. It serves no positive purpose. I was on Rikers Island for the first time in 1995 while at the tender age of 16. The charges were attempted murder and attempted burglary as a result of me trying to protect myself from a 42-year-old man who decided to force himself on me sexually because he thought I was developing well. The fact that this man sexually violated me was not taken into consideration when the first offer I received was 25 years to life. None of this was considered when I was offered a bail of $50,000 that I obviously couldn't afford to pay. I was forced to sit on Rikers, where I was put into an adolescent housing unit that was being run by male officers who reminded me of the type of man I had just escaped. They were just as abusive, both mentally and emotionally. So instead of me having that time to heal and work on my young self, I had to learn to develop thick skin, and I had to learn how to survive. Otherwise, Rikers Island would have chewed me up alive and spit me out. When I was back at Rikers about 15 years later, I found that toxic culture as unchanged as a toxic environment. Because of the work of formerly incarcerated advocates, many of them in this room, we've made progress with the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act. I could have been given leniency when I acted in self-defense. With the raise the age that recently passed, adolescents are no longer on Rikers. We just passed bill reform that will keep thousands of people across the city and state from spending even a day in jail. But there is more work to be done. Rikers is not an environment fit for any human being, and we won't leave anyone behind there. It is time we shut down Rikers and build up our own communities. In the new facilities, the Department of Corrections cannot have the role and care of human beings.
We could ask you to sum up, please. Thank you.
Sure. So in closing, we must invest in our communities. We must make sure that that the money taken from the NYPD gang intelligence unit goes into credible messages. We need to make sure that money goes into restorative justice centers, credible messages, alternative to incarceration, job trainings, medical facilities, housing, and other things for our adolescents and our adults. I just ask that you guys consider the plan, but make sure that there's some conditions so that it further helps the community. Thank you.
Okay, we have Barry Campbell. So I have a representative from State Senator Development Up Montgomery, Jason Salmon, be followed by Scott Jacobs and Murphy Austin.
Thank you, Borough President. The Senator is in Albany finishing up our legislative session. I'll read a statement on her behalf. Dear Borough President Adams, while I support the closure of Rikers Island, I'm unequivocally against the current New York City borough-based jail system proposal. The proposal nearly doubles the size of the current Brooklyn jail from 20 to approximately 36 stories. This is completely unacceptable and contradicts the spirit of the city's borough-based jail system plan for smaller, safer, and fairer jails. Furthermore, Community Board 1 in the Bronx and Community Board 1 in Manhattan have overwhelmingly voted down the city's borough-based jail system plan. The city must take the community's input into strong consideration and significantly alter the borough-based jail plan to reflect the needs of the directly impacted populations and achieve true criminal justice reform. My colleagues and I in the State Senate have recently enacted 3 critical criminal justice reforms that will significantly reduce New York City's jail population: discovery, speedy trial, and bail reform. Based on the actions of the state legislature and current city initiatives to reduce the jail population, there is no reason we should be building larger jails in our communities. Therefore, my colleague, Assemblywoman Joanne Simon, and I have concluded that cities should submit an alternative proposal in writing that reflects an average jail population of approximately 3,500 or less. Lastly, the city's plan lacks details regarding how to bring tangible resources to our most underserved communities. The implementation of employment, education, mental health, drug treatment, and other services should be included in the city's plan to close Rikers Island. Expanding the successful model to the community courts created by the Center for Court Innovation will help create more alternatives to incarceration. I'll wrap up. I stand with Assemblywoman Simon and the Boerum Hill Association in opposing the current proposal. I look forward to working with the city, other criminal justice entities, and my colleagues in the state legislature to close Rikers Island and create a criminal justice system where the use of incarceration is the last resort. Thank you.
Scott Jacobs, followed by Murphy Austin, followed by Matthew Bloom, William Norton, and Amy Breedlove.
My name is Scott Jacobs. I'm a longtime resident of the community and a board member of Fair Jails Brooklyn. I just have a question to ask. What is wrong with this picture? Why is this mayor tone deaf? I've been to meeting after meeting, community board meeting, neighborhood advisory council meetings. There have been informal meetings, there's this meeting, and it's almost unanimous that people feel very strongly about criminal justice reform. Almost unanimous that people feel that as part of that, Rikers Island must be closed. And as part of that, the borough-based jail system in concept is a good one, but there's one missing piece. The ULURP process, even though there's been 5 years of declining population, and we see it declining as far as the eye can see, there's been no modification to the ULURP plan. The mayor is tone deaf. It's unanimous, and this is not just happening in Brooklyn, it's in all, with the other 4 affected boroughs. And that's really all I want to say, is that somebody's got to wake up and listen to this nearly unanimous voice that the 4 affected communities have been speaking almost a year now. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker we have is Murphy Austin.
Hello, I'm here supporting the No New Jails Coalition to really say and demand that we can close Rikers now without investing $10 billion in new jails that will be locking people up for generations to come. As someone who works in housing advocacy, it's unbelievable to me that the mayor is investing billions of dollars into jails when there's a housing and homelessness crisis. And we know that jailing people not only are people who are victims of the homelessness crisis disproportionately in our jails right now, but jailing people actually accelerates homelessness crises across the country. So right now, the most well-resourced solution to housing and homelessness is policing, putting people in cages and jails, which is completely unacceptable to me. I also want to talk about the point that Deputy Director Dana Kaplan made about New York City can be a leader in criminal justice reform with this plan. The vision that No New Jails has for this city is to be a leader by closing down jails without building new ones, by actually taking the resources earmarked for this project and investing it in communities so that people do not end up in jail in the first place and are not harmed by the fundamental violence of incarceration in this country. I know that we can do this because there are so many ways to stop locking people up, from ending broken windows policing to ending pretrial detention, which would decrease the jail population by more than 6,000. This can be done and needs to be done, and we don't have to accept that the only way to close Rikers is to put billions into new jails. Thank you.
Understand that Assemblymember Joanne Simon is in the room, so when ready to come up, please do so. So we have Matthew Bloom.
Hi everyone, thank you. And thank you to the Borough President for holding this hearing. We're talking about who is going to be in jail in 2027. That's actually what the city is planning for. I strongly support anything at all that leads to the closure of Rikers Island. It is, by 19th century standards, it's a disgraceful place. And borough-based facilities seems a very sensible alternative. However, once bail reform takes effect, the largest single population in our jails will be people with serious mental health and substance abuse problems. We take the neediest, the most vulnerable, the most challenged, and the most desperate in our society, in this wealthiest city the world could ever imagine, and we put them in jail. It's just unspeakably wrong. Thank you. It's unspeakably wrong to be jailing the mentally ill. Communities need mental health facilities so people don't end up there. Right now, the best intentioned law officer in the country who found a man or woman acting out on the street in Brooklyn basically has nowhere to take them other than to jail. If they do get taken to a mental health facility, if they're not a danger to themselves or others, they're released in 24 hours. Finally, there's a great opportunity to locate a school for the youngest people incarcerated here in Brooklyn. The youngest people need to be separated from the population, the general population. They all need a chance to make up for the failure of the city's education system. And Brooklyn is a community with incredible resources and incredible availability to support such a school.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
By the way, just so you all know, those of us who came in earliest and signed up first were treated to the disrespect of whatever this magic system is of assigning speakers.
Okay, William Norton, please.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to scrap a lot of what I wrote here and speak to some issues that are probably more pertinent, but I will keep some of them. And I would start off with saying that the mayor's plan must be approved with conditions, but the conditions have to be realistic. And from what I'm hearing, they're not, or they haven't been taken out of the ULURP plan. Anyway, whatever jails are on Rikers and are vacant now should be demolished. This is a human rights crisis, and we can't have backsliding. We cannot say, well, who knows, maybe we'll have to open them up again, so let's keep a few around. No, we can't be doing that. So the jails have to go. And we can be repurposing Rikers Island once we get rid of the jails. I expect that to increase as we go through the application of the new laws that have been passed in Albany to allow people to not be incarcerated at first blush. So I think that will be another way that will make this move faster. But the underlying facilities of the new facilities have to reflect the goals of restorative and rehabilitative justice It makes me think of Common Justice, which is a program in Brooklyn. And for those in pretrial detention, there always has to be a presumption of innocence. The management and the staff should be trained in these areas, and punitive and violent treatment should be left on Rikers Island. The current correction officers and other staff who do not opt for retirement could be offered jobs in other uniformed services, in other city departments where openings occur, and they could also be offered to take the training that would be required of people staffing the new facilities, which would not be in the current correctional mode. And finally, I'll just say, we realize that a lot is at stake for inmates and employees. All groups have to be supported. Even that larger group, we're all part of that larger group that we refer to as human beings. Thank you.
Amy Bredlow, be followed by Barbara. I'm not going to necessarily get this right. There you go. Ethan Pryor and Ann Renda.
Amy Breedlove, the Cobble Hill Association. The Cobble Hill Association supports the closing of Rikers Island and the building of new jails and additional facilities to house and rehabilitate those who will be part of the criminal justice and mental health systems. So we are in support of this ULURP with significant modifications. The CHA's main question has been and continues to be, why does this single facility need to incorporate all the programmatic needs of the city's jail system? For example, many detainees' mental health and addiction issues are housed in the 40 to 50% of the jail beds that are designated as therapeutic. Why are these beds not located in medical or clinical facilities elsewhere in the borough and maybe centralized facilities where their needs can be better met? Removal of these beds would dramatically reduce the height and density of the new jail while better treating this vulnerable population outside of the DOC. The jail at 275 Atlantic Avenue must be reduced in terms of density and bulk. It must fit in with the fabric and character of the neighborhood with setbacks. The current ULURP proposed should be revised to reduce the bulk and density, account for traffic and parking concerns, and integrate community needs. We believe a jail and/or treatment facility can and should be built on on Staten Island. The city refuses to add this facility to the borough-based jail system. This flies in the face of the Lippman Commission's recommendation to locate smaller and safer jails in all 5 boroughs, servicing the needs of all of NYC. And also, we'd like to really push forward for a process that includes community engagement when we come to the design of these facilities. Right now, they are just massing studies within the ULURP. We really need to get down to the design and incorporate the communities.
Off, please. Thank you. Okay, we have Barbara.
So I'm going to be very brief. I certainly wholeheartedly support the closing of Rikers, but I'm very suspicious of a plan proposed by a mayor who will be long out of office when things start to go wrong and the building starts. He will not have to answer for any of his plans that will supposedly alleviate all the many problems in our jail system. And I ask that that be considered as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Ethan Pryor.
My name is Ethan Pryor. I am 10 years old. I would like to testify that Rikers Island closed down. I am already viewed in suicide as an upcoming potential problem in system that wasn't created to favor someone like me. I don't want to be the next Khalif Browder create more jobs, not jails.
Educate, not don't incarcerate.
Educate, not don't incarcerate.
Say thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Now, Ann Renda.
Thank you for this opportunity.
And just one moment, I want to call up the next speakers. Victor Herrera, Danielle Rosano, and Michaela Tomlinson. Okay, you could go on. Thank you.
Thank you. I come here to speak from my experience as a social worker in the late 1980s. And my first concern before that is understanding how a mayor and a real estate mogul are the most important part of the plan to close jails, and the Lippman report that reflects the need for smaller community in the incarcerated people's area so that they can have their own community and work on building their community is ignored. So I think I'm mostly concerned about the financial impetus and the lack of concern for the social impetus. De Blasio and Ratner, very happy. The story has turned into closing jails and helping criminals. There is no story about who's getting political donations and what's going to happen. The real social program I haven't seen. I don't know how many social workers, what's happening. I heard about the change of mentally ill and drug addicts going to the correct services. I'm thrilled, and that will put the number in half, so they don't have to be so big. It's, my thought is a story to support why we don't really need huge jails, and it's not really about jail. It's about the children. When I was a social worker, there was late 80s. There was a kid named Cleveland, and he was 10. And I was a social worker in charge of
If we could ask you to sum up,
kids
please. Thank you.
going to jail. His mother didn't go with him, although she wanted to. She was afraid to go to the hearings. And I went with him, and he was sent to jail. He was 10. And I was the only one there to say goodbye to him, and still. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Victor?
We with you. Hi, my name is Victor Herrera. I'm a longtime resident of Brooklyn. Rikers Island must close as fast as possible timeline. Rikers must close because of the history of violence and brutality, which I personally experienced, and which also my brother, who was also here, experienced recently. Rikers on Rikers Island and the hands of the Department of Correction, because of the fear and traumatic stress that resulted from it, those of us who have been there are still affected by it. The brutal assaults I experienced and the conditions I was subjected to on Rikers Island have affected my health, both physically and mentally. Rikers is known as a place of traumatic experiences for many of us that can never be forgotten. The only way to heal from all the trauma that many of us have experienced is to begin the process of closure. I support building borough-based facilities as a first step towards reducing the jail population and taking a new approach. But we can shrink the size of the facilities and the numbers of the people detained to even less than what the mayor has planned. The reforms that just happened in Albany will get us to a jail population below 5,000 very soon, but the mayor must make further efforts towards treatment and diversion. He can increase investments in alternatives to incarceration to eliminate sentences of 1 year or less, and he can invest in treatment alternatives for people with serious mental illness. For those who are not yet released by these reforms, we need to make sure that they are housed in much better conditions that support progressive rehabilitation rather than punishment, and are located centrally where the community can be involved. Being close to family and services and with their building designed differently will make it more possible for this to happen instead of banishing people to an isolated island. We must also remove the Department of Corrections from the role of managing these facilities in favor of something more like a case management type of approach. The DOC is an agency built on punishment with a staff of over 10,000 people who see their primary role as punishment and control. They cannot manage the new facilities. The time to close Rikers is now, and we cannot delay. More delays will mean more years of individuals being caught up on that miserable island. At this very moment, thousands of people are sitting there on a penal colony suffering. We have to start somewhere, and we have to move now. I urge you, Borough President Adams, to vote yes to this proposal with the important conditions that I have outlined. Thank you.
Thank you. Danielle?
Hello, my name is Danielle Rosario. I'm a public defender and policy counsel at the Fortune Society. And as we stand here today talking about building density and height, the implications that it will have on the community, I can't help but think about the 11 buildings that are on Rikers Island and why no one refers to that complex as the mega jail and talks about the impact that that had on the community and the number of people that are incarcerated there. These facilities are smaller than the mega jail that is Rikers Island. It will house the smallest number of people that New York City has ever seen incarcerated in our history. It will be done in a safer way, both for the people who are incarcerated and the correctional officers that work there. And the people have asked, why hasn't this been committed to in the ULURP process? But the mayor's office has said publicly that they will amend the ULURP application, and they have committed to that. It takes time. They're doing an assessment to determine the exact projection of the number of people who will be incarcerated and then adjusting the cost analysis and the number of beds accordingly. We want these facilities to be constructed well, both for the community and the people who will be housed there. As a service provider that works in reentry, we want to see this done in a way that facilitates a continuum of care to our services effectively and efficiently. We want to see the people who are housed suffer the least amount of harm so that when they come back to our community, they're able to thrive as leaders, as the leaders who formed this very plan to close Rikers Island, who are sitting in this room here today. A plan that didn't just start a year ago, that didn't just start with this ULURP application, a plan that started long before Mayor de Blasio was our mayor and will keep going long after Mayor de Blasio is out of office, because the same people who started this plan will make sure that the next person who gets elected will support this plan. Because once we start contracting for services to build these community jails, it cannot be undone. So once this ULURP vote has passed, we will commit to closing Rikers Island and to making sure that we as a society are judged by our character, and that character is voting yes to build the borough-based jails and do no harm.
Thank you. So, before Akila speaks, I'm going to introduce the next three speakers that will follow. Orion Sykes, Howard Felberg, and Robert Packnett.
Can I
Thank
start?
you. Go.
My name is Akila Tomlinson, and I'm one of many advocates, a part of Just Leadership USA's Close Rikers campaign, speaking on behalf of those currently and formerly incarcerated on Rikers Island and family members that have been impacted. Our campaign supports closing Rikers and building borough-based facilities that will not only be designed differently, but operate differently as well. I want to use this opportunity to talk about my oldest brother. He has been sitting on Rikers Island for over 600 days waiting for his case to go to trial. Some of those days he has spent in solitary confinement. My brother has been arrested for a crime he has not been found guilty of committing, and yet every day he spends in a cell on Rikers is a reminder for him that this justice system is not just, especially for people that look like him. My brother was arrested in August of 2017. 2 months later, his daughter was born. Last year, his daughter turned 1 year old, and he still hasn't met her. If she saw him today, she would see a stranger. When I visit him, he doesn't want me to talk about his children, nor does he want me to send pictures when I send him letters. My oldest niece is 7 years old. She's at an age where she's beginning to ask questions like, "Where's my daddy?" And all her mother can say is, "He's at school, but he's coming back real soon." Since his arrest, my brother does his best to not receive an infraction. The environment he's in has forced him into a reclusive lifestyle. He tells me he keeps his head down and minds his business, and he tells me not to worry. When I visit him and see that he's physically not in good condition, I can only imagine what he's going through mentally. He has detached himself from everyone he loves because he says if people sense the weakness, that's how you get taken advantage of. Being subjected to live in the present conditions of Rikers is doing more harm than good for those being held there. The city can change this, and our campaign recognizes that it will take all of us working together to accomplish this goal. We encourage the city's immediate support to build borough-based facilities to ensure Rikers is closed as fast as possible. The city can plan to reduce the average daily jail population to less than 3,000 individuals by committing to investing in effective alternatives to incarceration, decriminalizing the most common low-level offenses, such as turnstile jumping and marijuana possession, and removing all people with serious mental illness from the correction system entirely and placing them into therapeutic settings not managed by the Department of Corrections. Not only do new facilities need to be built, the city must commit that these facilities will be operated differently. The Department of Corrections agency is built on a model of punishment, and the vast majority has proven themselves unable and unwilling to end the culture of violence that consumes Rikers Island. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next speaker, Orion Sykes.
Good evening. My name is Orion Sykes, just for the record.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, man. Number one thing I would like to say is that closing Rikers is, I don't think, is the number one solution. For me, closing Rikers is a reactive tactic and not a proactive tactic. A lot of the people on Rikers are dealing with mental health issues, smaller crimes. I think that the training of the correction officers needs to be addressed more than the closing of the building does not put people in humane places. The building does not turn on the air conditioner when it's 100 degrees outside. The building does not put you in a room with people who are going to attack you and stab you and not do anything about it. The building doesn't do those things. The correction officers do those things. So there needs to be a retraining of the correction officers who run the building, because if you open up 4 new buildings in 4 new boroughs, you're still gonna have the same correction officers in those buildings committing the same atrocities and doing the same heinous acts. For me, this is a reactive tactic, and we need to become more proactive. Maybe using the funds that were talked about to build all of these new facilities, to build mental health facilities to help people with mental health issues. Maybe to build some resources for those communities that you plan to build all of these jails in those communities. Maybe give those communities some resources to keep the people from making those mistakes or having to go to that sort of lifestyle to support themselves and survive. One of the things that I know from being an on-the-ground worker at a non-for-profit agency that deals with reentry is that everybody that is in Rikers is not a criminal. Some people in Rikers are just trying to survive. And that's just the fact of the situation. When you don't know where your next meal is gonna come from, that's a situation that I don't know how many of you in here can relate to, or how many people on the board can relate to, but when you are in that situation, choices have to be made right then and there. Some people have no options. Some people come up with no options. So I think that the funds used to build more jails shouldn't be used to build more jails. They should be used to give those communities options so they don't have to turn to criminal activity. Thank you.
Okay. Would hold the applause, please. So the next speaker, Howard Feldberg.
Good evening. I've been to community board meetings, I've been to the town halls, and I agree with Ms. Kaplan on one thing. We have seen a great deal of criminal justice reform. We saw the district attorney's offices implement their own bail reform and discovery regulations. We saw the state legislature implement implement bail reform, discovery, asset forfeiture, speedy trial. What we've seen from the mayor is the same plan. And I appreciate that these plans take time, but they require transparency. This is the first time I've heard Ms. Kaplan say that there's going to be revision. Maybe there's been other public statements about that, but we have not seen the plan. It's very hard to vote on something when you don't know what you're getting. There continues to be this statement about borough-based jail systems, which is hypocrisy in plain sight. The mayor's office trots out these studies that show that community-based systems, although no jail system is good, have better therapeutic value. Does that mean Staten Island is a lesser borough? Does that mean their population is undeserving of those resources? Does that mean Brooklyn has to shoulder those resources? Is there a reason why that question is never addressed? The speaker from the Fortune Society said something very interesting. Once it is done, it can't be undone. And that's a very poignant statement. That means our obligation is to do this right the first time. To do this right, we have to have transparency, we have to have a plan, we have to know what it looks like, we have to know what the resources are allocated to. It can't be lip service, it can't be general statements. And I urge the borough president to vote no until we know what that plan is and he knows what he is voting on. Thank you all for your time.
Okay, before Robert speaks, I want to call up the next speakers. Herbert Murray, Ryan Holbrook, and King Downing. Come up, Robert. Thank you.
Hello. I'm here with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and I just have a few things to say. I'll try to keep it brief. Rikers Island is an atrocity. There is no denying that. You've heard the stories here today. There are 1,000 more like them. Rikers absolutely needs to be torn down brick by brick. But this needs to happen on the people's terms. And the new jail proposal is not that. What's the point of closing Rikers Island just to build 4 Rikers Towers around the boroughs? Since when is a smaller jail more humane? I'm sure when they were building Rikers, they had the same promises of more humane. Just down the street, a few blocks away at 120 Skirmerhorn Street, Kayam Livingston was left to die on the floor of a cell. She was murdered by the hateful negligence of this system of mass incarceration here in New York City. We don't need jails in Brooklyn. What we need is access to housing, health care, and support for public education. What we need is for the NYPD to stop acting like a military occupation and treating our home like a war zone. We need them to stop killing people like Kayam Livingston, or Akai Gurley, Delron Small, and Sahid Vassal. Regarding this new jail proposal, don't piss in my ear and tell me it's raining. This will not solve our problems. It will only displace them.
Okay, next speaker, Herbert Murray.
My name is Herbert Murray, and I've been impacted by being in Brooklyn House's detention in 1979 and on Rikers Island in 1981 until I was transported upstate correction facility with a sentence of 15 years to life for a murder I did not commit. I came home with the determination of saving our youth being victimized by mass incarceration. I am a member of Just Leadership USA, whose slogan is, those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but farther away from the resources. I do not want to fully elaborate on the ongoing violence and corruption at Rikers Island, which is destroying lives on both sides, because most of us agree that it definitely needs to be closed. But I am here to speak about the community-based facilities. No jails. We need to take the word jail out our vocabulary, because when we use the word jail, every negative thing comes to our minds that doesn't represent the community-based jails. Also, under no circumstances can the DOC be involved in the operation of the community-based facility besides open and closing doors, because we do not want to recreate that same environment of jails. Rikers Island represents jails. The community-based facility represent building our youth so we can invest ourselves in their rehabilitation. There's an old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. We as a community have to reinvest ourselves in the rehabilitation of our youth. Our kids are at risk in society because there's no productive programs. Our schools became pipelines to prison. And in closing, I urge this board to vote yes on the plan with the important condition that the Close Rikers Island campaign is calling for. No more delay. We must close it now. Thank you.
Okay, Brian.
Hello, my name is Brian. Pardon me. My name is Brian Holbrook, and I'm here as a supporter of the Close Rikers campaign to urge Borough President Adams to vote yes with conditions on the plan. At my job, I represent parents with ACS cases in family court here in Brooklyn. Unfortunately, people of color and poor people in our city are targeted by child protective authorities just as they're targeted by NYPD. And some of my clients are incarcerated at Rikers Island while also experiencing enforced separation from their children. I've seen time and again how the isolation of and long travel times to Rikers prevent parents and children from being able to see each other and maintain the bonds that are so critical both for preserving family and to successfully transitioning from Rikers back to the community. Parents who would be entitled to at least 2 visits per week with their children if they were at liberty end up seeing their children once per month or less, all because family members and foster parents cannot spend hours on a bus every weekend bringing children to and from Rikers for visits. Moving to a borough-based system would reduce travel times and make it significantly easier to bring kids to see their incarcerated parents. And regular contact with parents is one of the best ways to mitigate the trauma to children associated with foster care and parental incarceration. In addition, my clients' family court cases are too often delayed when DOC fails to bring them from Rikers for scheduled court dates. When an incarcerated parent is not brought to family court for an important court date, families and children are left in limbo, often for months between court dates. In a borough-based system, incarcerated parents would be much closer to court, enabling them to come and participate in their cases and avoiding numerous unnecessary delays. For these reasons, and for all the reasons given by members of the Close Rikers campaign, I urge the Borough President to vote yes with conditions on this plan, including the conditions that the plane capacity of the borough-based facilities be reduced to no more than 3,000, that DOC not be allowed to run these borough-based facilities, and that the city make long overdue investments in poor communities of color to remedy the systemic injustices that produce both family separation and incarceration. Thanks.
Thank you. Before King comes up, I'd like to call the next 3 speakers. Aquarel Stanley, if I got that right, Minister Dr. Victoria Phillips, and Tanaya Sykes. Okay, go ahead, thank you.
So thank you for holding this hearing. My name is King Downing. I'm a lawyer, but please don't hold that against me. I appreciate, I've already changed the things I was going to say because I've heard what some of the people in opposition have said. And I appreciate their concerns because I know people are trying to, I hope, trying to make this move forward in the best way they can. But I'll tell you, I don't think the reaction against this project has been unanimous right now, because the question I have is, how many of the formerly incarcerated people, some of those who testify, have been invited or allowed to participate in those meetings? I'm seeing the people who are speaking against this now, and I don't want to talk about the way that race is leaning one way or the other, but we have to take into consideration these kinds of things when people say they're against something or for something. The idea that there need to be more details in the plan, I can see why people would feel that way. The senator is saying that the bills will that are going to deal with the bail and all those other kinds of things is going to reduce the population. What the senator hasn't said is what's going to happen to the people who are unaffected by the new bills. Where are they going to be? They're still going to be on Rikers with all the things everybody has talked about here still being under those conditions. Is that really the way we should push back from the plan, by leaving people to be exposed to what we've seen happen there so far? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And do you really, really believe that the stories that you've heard about these people would do anything but have you push the pedal to the metal on the plan and to say, oh, I'm against it because we don't have the details? Step up, take part in the meetings, push the details you want to see, but don't leave people to rot, be killed, commit suicide, be beaten under the direction of the officers that were running the plan and all the other things that were going on there. And the last thing is the idea that smaller isn't going to be any better. Everybody's pushing for smaller schools, pushing for smaller hospitals and clinics, so smaller seems to work everywhere but when we're talking about prisons. The problem with Rikers is, yeah, it's the officers, but it's also the size of that institution, and it needs to be reduced, and I'm an abolitionist. I think jails and prisons should be dismantled, but we have to have an intermediate step. We can't just leave people there while we figure out what the final plan will be. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker, not sure, Aquarel? You'll get it right from me. Thank you.
I will, thank you. Good afternoon and thank you. My name is Akira and I'm with the Alliance of Families for Justice. I'm a formerly incarcerated woman. I was in my first month of pregnancy when arrested and could not afford bail. I endured my pregnancy and had my son in state prison. Rikers Island needs to close as it is dilapidated, old, rat vermin-infested infrastructure with a culture of torture and fosters inhumane, degrading, psychologically destructive, violent, life-destroying experiences for anyone who survives the experience. Change must start somewhere, and although I am not a supporter of putting anyone in a cage for any length of time, the city's current plan seeks to address many issues that the current system fails to even think twice of. According to an independent study just published yesterday, local jails have no impact on property value or crime rates in a neighborhood. Officials and people should support the plan because there has been no other time in history of this city that any administration has been willing to come to the table and engage multiple organizations from a range of services, mental health, formerly incarcerated people, advocacy groups, social justice groups, therapeutic health services, in addition to the corrections and policing organizations, yes, unfortunately. Women-specific needs, health and safety are specifically being focused on with an emphasis on family, pregnancy, children, and visitation for a centralized women's facility. With formerly incarcerated women working on the plan, development, and input, sexual violence against women, as well as the other mentioned needs, will be in the forefront. If the plan does not move forward, the ULURP process fails. It means Rikers stays as it is, and people continue to die, suffer, and be tortured every day with abusive guards and all-around unsafe conditions for everyone involved. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. We need to make a better system. Nothing is perfect. However, we have to have the power. We do have the power to make the changes that we know must happen. As a formerly incarcerated person and a voice for those who cannot speak right now behind the walls, this plan must move forward and we must continue to strive for change. Change always.
Thank you so much. Next speaker is Minister Dr. Victoria Phillips.
And I also had time yielded to me earlier. Yes, Barry Campbell yielded his time to me. So I get 4 minutes, not 2. Yes.
2 minutes, sorry.
Excuse me?
2 minutes. Mr. Campbell can certainly come up.
But if he signed up and yielded his time
He
to
can
me.
certainly speak if he wants to come up at any time. His name's
Okay, well,
Nicole.
no problem. I'll start speaking and finish when I need to. My name is Minister Dr. Victoria A. Phillips, but everyone calls me Ms. V. I own a holistic business on J Street, and I've been a member of the Jails Action Coalition since 2012 and work at a mental health project, Urban Justice Center. How much is a life worth? Think about that, because today is June 6, 2015. Many politicians mention his name, yet are not dedicated to truly creating the change needed. Today is the anniversary of Khalif Browder's death. Torture is real in America. I worked on Rikers doing cognitive behavioral therapy. In January, the Board of Corrections released their own report on how the Department of Corrections reports differs from what medical staff reports on injuries. Do the work and look the report up yourself. As an Army brat, I was taught never to leave anyone behind in your platoon. I knew I had to do my part because my mother is buried in a military cemetery, and that's why I advocate across the criminal justice system. In the past 5 years, I've been a part of ending solitary confinement for 16 and 21-year-olds, which we did in 2015, raising the age, getting the visitors bus going, and so much more. To make change, we all must do the work. Leadership takes individuals willing to take a risk and do what is right. Yes, it is scary to move forward, but how can we not? The Federal Monitor released its 7th report in April, stating that Rikers is still a torture island. As I close, let me remind you all that when our borough was outraged at the treatment of NDC, it was simply because we could see the lights off and we could hear them banging on their cells. So Mr. Borough President, who's no longer here tonight at this meeting, 90% of New York City's incarcerated individuals are black and brown. I challenge you to put politics to the side and hear the call of your people. None of our ancestors fled from slavery with a real plan, yet they knew their life depended on them taking action. You can vote yes with conditions, and the ULURP will be amended. Do what's right. Have a blessed day.
Next speaker, Tanaya Sykes. Before Tanaya, I'd like to ask the next 3 speakers to come up. Tricia Yank, I'm not quite sure. Ayanov, Luis Herrera, and Joseph Mendoza.
My name is Tania Sykes, and I would like to say that I am not in favor of closing Rikers Island. So, closing Rikers Island would only cost the city billions of dollars in demolition and construction costs and wreak havoc upon the city's neighborhoods as new jails are built in residential areas. It would also create problems for neighboring jails that are already facing overpopulation. Where will the residents that are currently in Rikers Island go once it is closed? Painting Rikers Island as a penal colony and simply getting rid of it will not solve the larger problems that the criminal justice system faces in this city. What will help is an effective plan that modernizes the facility and ensures that individuals held in Rikers Island face better conditions and are not faced with inhumane tortures that many people have talked about. Also, ensuring that the correctional officers that are placed in these facilities are given the proper training to limit the amount of inhumane practices that the facility sees. Because as a former speaker said, it is not the building itself that is causing all of these problems that people hear about. It is the training that these correctional officers are given and that they are not foreseeing out. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Tricia Lynch. Don't see. Okay, so Luis Herrera.
Good evening. My name is Luis Herrera. I'm a native of Brooklyn. And I'm a survivor of Rikers Island. I got the mental and physical scars to prove that. Rikers Island is a place that breaks spirits, breaks families apart. The buildings themselves and everything in them are broken. I mean, the place is literally falling apart. I used to be on a paint crew, and they had me painting over everything that was already, like, you're putting a dress on something that you can't fix. I mean, everything about Rikers Island is torture. The isolation of Rikers Island itself is torture. The visitation process is hell. I mean, I was upstate. You get 6 to 7 hours upstate to spend with your family. On Rikers Island, your family takes 6 or 7 hours just to see you. And it's only for less than an hour. I mean, getting to court was another ordeal. We'd be woken up at 4 in the morning, going to the bullpen and get searched, being forced to strip down in front of other people. Men, you know, like, with no regard. It's all inhumane. You know, we sometimes spend all day eating sandwiches that was made 3 weeks ago. Like, who wants to eat that? We cannot keep putting human beings through this degradation. We have to act now. The most important first step is to reduce the jail population. And we can do even better than the city proposed. Instead of 4,000, plan for like 3,000. People by increasing investments, ATIs, and making sure people with serious mental health needs and get treatment. I mean, most of them is vets. I mean, come on, y'all. They fought for this very city, for our own protection, and they being, like, come on. Wake up. Anyone who is detained, man, we have to build borough-based facilities with much better communities. Give me a second. And people at these places got to be monitored by the communities. Y'all saying no, but we got to monitor this. Rikers Island has the longest bridge in the world.
Can I ask you to sum up, please? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
But I'm going to just say this. When I say Rikers Island has the longest bridge in the world, it's a cover-up. By the time you get there to find out what's going on, everything is cleaned up. So, I mean, I'm asking you, he's not sitting here right now, camouflage yourself. Go to Rikers Island as a regular person, as a prisoner, and you see for yourself how we being treated. And then you make a decision. That's all I'm asking from you. Find out through experience.
Okay, next speaker, Joseph Mendoza. Before Joseph speaks, I'd like to call the next speakers. Donna Hilton, Sheikha Cologne, and Brandon Holmes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Mendoza, and I wish for the board to vote yes on closing Rikers Island with conditions. As a service provider who has been working with individuals released from Rikers and has worked on Rikers Island, I have firsthand knowledge on the conditions and environment. Some conditions of which you've heard today. We live in the greatest city and need to set example towards fixing our mass incarceration in this country. If we're calling it a criminal justice system, we need to call it a mental health system, a housing system, a race system, and a lack of employment system. Rikers Island oppresses every mentioned thing that I just said. Research shows that everyone in this room has directly or indirectly known someone who has had interaction with the criminal justice system. Closing Rikers is about supporting our community. Having smaller jails located in the communities creates stronger families and creates a path for a transition back to the community as most individuals re-entry back into these communities. We need to keep our people in our communities. Although I support closing Rikers Island, I urge the city to make improvements to the current plan, expanding affordable and supportive housing and programs that address educational and employment and mental health needs outside of the criminal justice system. The city must also commit to ensuring the new facilities operate differently with more trainings to our correctional officers, as a few of you have mentioned today. For facilities to service the purpose of healing, rehabilitation, and reentry to people held there would also need more interaction with staff who are trained for that purpose. The city must commit to providing training to all correctional staff to ensure that they are fostering an environment for rehabilitation, not further punishment once they've been sentenced. We have a chance to do better. I urge you all to vote yes to close Rikers Island. Thank you all for your time and appreciate it.
Okay, I have Donna Hilton, not there. Okay, Sheikha Cologne and Brandon Holmes. Just since no one else is coming up, can I call the next three speakers? Lucy Coteen, Tiffany Chu, and Betty Frybush. Thank you.
Good. How's everybody doing? Thank you all for coming out to discuss this sensitive topic that is closing Rikers Island. My name is Shaka Cologne, and I'm in favor of the 4 borough-based jails. I am a community organizer for Catal Center. First of all, I want to have a quick moment of silence for Khalid Browder and everyone that has lost their life to Rikers Island because they deserve this respect. Okay, I remember I was a straight out for most of my life. Stayed out of trouble for most of my life, and I stayed out of legal trouble. I got into a situation, which we all do as young kids. We all make mistakes, and for which I thought I was going to be unforgiven for when I was brought to Rikers Island. Rikers Island, when I went, I remember hearing, before I even got there, just all the rumors that I would hear about it, and that long bus ride to the island, and just being terrified for what awaited me on the other side. Once I got there, I once realized that everyone in there had broken spirits. They had become energy vampires. They wanted your good energy, they wanted your bad energy, because they lost all hope and they lost whatever part of themselves that they could never get back. I heard a couple remarks here, people saying that the building, something about the building is not, it can't do bad things to people, or it's about the CEOs in there, they cause all the harm or whatever, but I want to say that the building is on toxic land. It's on toxic land. It's causing people to become ill and sick, mentally ill, and it's breaking them even more. I, myself, have developed sleep paralysis. I have common nightmares almost every night about my time on Rikers Island and fears of going back. I used to wake up in the middle of the night while I was still going through my case, not being able to move, being awake but asleep at the same time. That's a feeling that I've never gone through before, and I've never experienced it before I went to Rikers Island. One more thing I want to say, the only thing that got me through was my belief in God and my family, that everyone is not blessed to have family that's willing to come visit them on Rikers Island all the time because of the hassle that my mom and my current girlfriend told me that they went through. They were treated like prisoners. They were treated like they were inmates on Rikers Island as well. Rikers Island needs to be shut down immediately, effectively. Yes. I urge you to vote in favor of closing Rikers Island and in favor of the 4 new borough-based jails. Thank you.
Thank you. Brandon?
My name is Brandon Holmes. I'm a resident of Bed-Stuy, and I'm representing the Close Rikers campaign from Just Leadership USA. In the past 3 years, the leadership of directly impacted people has moved closing Rikers from an abstract idea to a citywide goal within reach. As this has happened, there's been a pattern we've seen in many of these hearings and discussions. We've heard from people who've had the privilege of not having experienced Rikers or visiting their loved ones on Rikers, suggesting that we should scrap the plan, vote it down, or start over and leave people on Rikers until we find a better alternative, with no answer to the question of what will happen to the people who are still trapped there. We are the organization that many people fail to mention when they talk about the impact of bail, speedy trial, and discovery reform. We are the organization who launched and with our staff and organizers across the state led that campaign to secure those pretrial victories in Albany. We have also seen people most harmed by Rikers who have educated themselves on this issue and the process of city government because it matters so deeply to them, and they know the power of organizing that got us here. Our leaders understand that this is not simply a yes or no decision, rather a plan that can be shaped through the same fierce advocacy and strategic organizing that made this conversation possible. You have heard from people who have not only shared their stories of Rikers Island, but have done the hard work of analyzing all of the possible scenarios and fighting for all of the ways we can get thousands of people free in the next few years and close all 10 jails associated with Rikers Island. Our primary goals are clear. Reduce the city's capacity to incarcerate New Yorkers from 14,000 beds to 3,000 or below, from our current 12 jail facilities to 4. Improve conditions for all New Yorkers who may be remanded or remain on Rikers Island serving city sentences, and also reducing our over-reliance on the criminal legal system by forcing this mayor and the administration to push all legislative and executive actions that can continue to get people off of Rikers Island in the long term, such as eliminating those city year sentences. It was never going to be easy or convenient to close Rikers, and solving an 84-plus year human rights crisis rarely ever will be. On this extremely complex issue, we align with the leadership of formerly incarcerated leaders who have experienced Rikers firsthand in New York's prisons, and we have led the city to confront this issue and will be here long after any administration begins their plan or their phase to close Rikers. Thank you.
So Lucy, followed by Tiffany Chu and Betty Fabush. And if you could hold a second, since they're not up here, I'd like to call next speakers John Dew, Zachary Katnelson, and Sherrod Cole.
Okay. Hi. Good evening. My name is Lucy Coteen. The saying goes that if you build it, they will come. We want to say no to massive new jails. First of all, the size and circumstances of the jail keeps changing under this administration, so you don't know what you are voting for. The ULURP application is premature and should be withdrawn. Judge Littman advised to put in small, more human-sized jails. He never suggested mega jails. What can possibly go right when you place 1,500, even 1,150 beds and men and their male guards together in one location? Years of experience shows this does not work. How is putting human beings in cages reform? We need alternatives to putting people in steel boxes. Recent legislation passed in Albany will greatly reduce the jail population. 3 important changes: bail reform, speedy trial, and discovery took place in Albany. Decriminalizing weed will further the reduction. Jails and alternatives must reflect the results of these reforms. Why plan for such massive-sized jails before knowing the number of future inmates? Experience shows if they build it, they will fill it. In 2018, the New York State budget for the Department of Corrections is $1.39 billion. What do the inmates get for our tax money? Bad food, bad health care, and an increase of violence. The taxpayers get the warehousing of human potential and a big bill for our taxes. Rather than putting that money into jails, it should go to prevention by improving education, housing, job training, and health care. In 2017, New York spent $302,296 per person in jail. $500,000 was spent on Keith Browder for 3 years in jail, 2 years in solitary confinement without a hearing. Where did that get him? New York City has the most expensive per-person
ask you to
cost
sum
in
up,
the
please?
country
Thanks.
because we have 2 staff people for each inmate. Now, on top of that, the mayor thinks spending $11 billion on new jails, $15 to $22 billion to redevelop Rikers, and $250 million for a new training college for correctional officers is the answer to closing Rikers. So the answer to mass incarceration for this mayor is more mass incarceration, plus $33 billion. Vote no
Again,
until
if
the
it's-
plan for new jails is fully fleshed out. Thank you.
So another call for Tiffany, Betty Fabush, okay, John Dew, and Zachary.
Good evening. Thank you for having this hearing. My name is Zachary Katz-Nelson. I'm the Policy Director of the Lippman Commission. We were just mentioned a moment ago, I'm here to speak in support of the plan. We certainly believe that there can be improvements made, and we look forward to working with the city to do just that. The issue, for instance, of treatment of people with mental health concerns and illnesses. Where should they be housed? There's no question that the current jail system is not the proper place. The city is examining that. We believe it must be a true priority to move people out of the jail system and into proper facilities. People who have dependency issues, substance dependency issues, they too should get treatment and not jail. We believe it is critical that the city commit to destroying the jails on Rikers that are vacant now, and to continue to do so as the population continues to drop. And we believe it is critical that, as the city is already examining and has started to do, but continue to do more, to properly invest in the communities that have been so harmed by the criminal justice system for so long. To invest in issues that were raised earlier, things like literacy, things like jobs, things that will stop people from entering the criminal justice system in the first place. We know that is possible. This is not rocket science. It is not easy, but it requires our dedication, our commitment. It requires the commitment of every politician who is in office today and those to come, to put the money where it needs to be, to put their commitments where we know many of them already say they are. We know the city is working hard to decarcerate. We know that they have a plan that stands behind that. Some may believe that it's not going to come to fruition. As has been said, it's up to us to make that happen. We will stand with everyone to try and make that happen. We know it can be. We've already gotten this far. 3 years ago, the idea of even having a hearing like this would have been a ludicrous notion. The idea that there would have been a plan to close Rikers on the table, you would have said that, people would have thought you were crazy. We can make this happen, and we can make this happen soon. We look forward to working together with everyone to make this a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Sharad.
Hi, everyone. Sharad Kohli from Fair Jails, Brooklyn. The city talks about inhumane conditions as the main reason to close Rikers. So who is responsible for that? The city is, and they fail miserably on the 2 components of why inhumane conditions exist. The first is, how do you treat the people in there? We all know the history of the DOC. It's a strong union that the city has lost control of. The second, the facilities you live in. If you don't spend money to fix things when they're bad, then over time they will get inhumane. For 6 months, I was part of the NAC meetings, and as part of that, we visited Rikers, and nobody should live under those conditions. But whose fault is that? It's the city. They haven't spent money, and yet they complain about the fact that Rikers is inhumane. It's on them. There is no vertical jail of the size that's being proposed anywhere in the world. Why does the city think that they have mastered this plan and they can run a jail of that size, especially when during fire, and I've raised this question a bunch of times, what happens if there's a fire? You have, at any given time, between the people living in there and the staff, there's going to be 2,000 people. How do you evacuate 2,000 people in a case of an emergency? I've got no answers to that. It's forthcoming. How do you not think of this stuff when you propose a plan? Our group welcomes the closure of Rikers, and piggyback on the work that Jess leadership has done, we accept 3,000 or less based on all the reforms that have passed, with the one condition that I disagree with them, which is that why should it be 4 boroughs? It should be 5 boroughs. They keep saying 4 boroughs. It should be 5 boroughs. There are people from Staten Island also who are in there. They should share the burden. The city has no credibility and should not be trusted with the pie in the sky proposal. Thank you.
Okay, next speaker is John Dew. Before John speaks, I want to call the next 3 speakers, Zach Martin, Andy Scruton, and Anna Riccardi.
Good evening, Sir Richard Barrick and Community Board. My name is John Dew. I am a 20-year member of Community Board 2, 4 years as the board chair. I currently sit on the Public Services and Transportation Committees and the Land Use Committees at Community Board 2. I attended all 4 of the hearings that were connected to this ULURP application, including the public hearing and the general community board meeting where we heard from everyone that wanted to speak about this ULURP application. I recommended that we support this for the simple reason is that we have to get this Rikers Island issue closed. It has to close. Now, the recommendation that came out was a totally different building than what was proposed in the ULURP application, but we have to get the process started. The longer we wait, and I hear discussion of waiting for the next application to be put forward, hearing the next administration that's going to come on board, and nothing happens with the closure of Rikers Island. That is the priority here. Everything that has to happen, the folks in the community have to continue to engage to make sure that we get a better product. But at this point, we have to begin closure of Rikers Island. I have visited Rikers Island. I will tell you, it's subhuman. And the United States incarcerates more black and brown people, but more people in general, than any country on this earth. We have to start this process now. I have 4 seconds. I'm going to yield my 4 seconds.
Zach Martin.
My name's Zach Martin. I'm a community activist organizer, also a pastor in the neighborhood, living downtown. I just want to start with a prayer because we're talking about weighty matters. And so wherever you land and whatever you believe, to say amen is just to say we agree. And so if you agree with me, I'd invite you to say we agree at the end. We are talking about weighty matters. We need to come with hearts, minds, and ears open. Might we remember to focus on souls, not simply statistics, people, not just policy, that we would come into this with understanding before we criticize. We need humility. We need wisdom, not just knowledge, so we can bring solutions, not just focus on problems. We need to work together so we can move forward well. We can disagree, but we can't attack. We need to work with and for each other, that we might bring each other along the way and bring help, hope, and healing, because our liberty and our growth is bound up together, and might the change that we want to see start with ourselves. There is no perfect solution to this problem. But I was reminded, biking over here today, that there's a bus picking up family members, taking them to Rikers Island today, right now. And I work with residents that don't want to go to Rikers Island because they don't want to get on that bus because of what it means for them as a family. They have left their families behind because they understand what's going on in that island. And so we need to see Rikers Island closed. It's an isolating and toxic environment, and a needless delay is to perpetuate trauma for both those incarcerated and the families that are dealing with their loved ones that are incarcerated. We need to be remembering that someone who's in jail has not yet committed a crime. We are not talking about people that have yet been convicted of a crime. And so when we're talking about a borough-based plan, what we need to be talking about is not dealing with criminals, but providing opportunities for people to be healed and helped. And we stand with those who want to see change happen in our communities.
Thank you. So next speaker, can we ask to hold that? Andy, do we have Andy Scruton, please?
Good evening, my name is Andy Scruton. I'm speaking on behalf of Fair Jails Brooklyn. I'm going to keep my comments short to not repeat things that have been said by others. I'm for closing Rikers. I'm for using the opportunity to build something better. I'm for detainees being detained in the communities in which they live. I'm for making that happen, working with the community. I'm for reducing the jail population and for jail reform, and for jails that follow the Lippman Commission and the recommendations that he outlined. But the unfortunate thing is that we're here now with the plan in front of us and we have a yes or no. And unfortunately that process to create that plan is flawed and the proposal does not make sense. And the city is what's created that. It's they that should have done the job to put us in a better position, because we want the jail, we want the right jail, and we want a jail that's fair for all. We don't want oversized, antiquated, vertical facilities that just don't meet the latest designs in what jail and how jails should be constructed. You're going to build a new jail, construct it right. The city created the problem. The problem is at Rikers. Don't let the city create 4 more problems. Don't bring Rikers to the boroughs. Fix the problem, just don't transfer the problem. And we urge the Brooklyn Borough President to recommend to reject, because this is missing a very vital opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Ann Riccardi. Next speaker is Dave Elke, I think it is, Nat Rubin, and Quinn Raymond. So I have Dave, followed by Nat, followed by Quinn.
Good evening. My name is Dave Elke. I live on Clinton Street here in Brooklyn. I'm a member of the Justice Ministries Committee of the Presbyterian Churches of New York City. I urge our borough and the City Council to vote yes to the mayor with these conditions. Closing the remaining active jails on Rikers Island is a moral imperative and human rights crisis. Action needs to be taken immediately to close and demolish at least 4 of the remaining Rikers Island jails, which are not needed due to reduced population. This can create immediate cost savings to provide funds for alternative programs to incarceration. Because of recent criminal justice reform, the total capacity of the borough-based facilities, which probably should be called rehab centers instead of jails, should be 3,000 people instead of the 5,000 that were planned. This reduced population should be distributed to the 4 proposed borough-based jails, plus a separate women's facility for 100 people, a separate facility on Staten Island. This planned capacity in the new facility on Atlantic Avenue should be reduced to 700 people. This would significantly reduce the height and mass of the building to 10 stories. And the design of the building should be flexible to enable jail floors to be converted to drug or mental health treatment facilities in the future. Operation of a new facility, the city must create facilities with the least restrictive conditions that support a restorative and rehabilitative approach to incarceration as opposed to the punitive approach currently in use. The people managing and running a new facility must be capable and willing to provide a healing environment. This requires a different social services-oriented staff and management with new job descriptions that must run the facility. Current correctional officers and staff, they should be offered training, a new training facility to compete for these radically different positions, and also be offered positions in other city departments, since the new facilities will require smaller staff. Closing Rikers Island is an urgent human rights issue that we cannot delay. It's an embarrassment to the city. We must continue this fight, but do it in a way that respects our local community, as well as the people incarcerated and employees being displaced. Thank you.
Nat Rubin, Quinn Raymond. Before Quinn speaks, I'd like to call 3 more speakers: Justin Cohn, Abigail Cuniff, and Vika Reyna.
My name is Quinn Raymond, and my family and I live about 1,200 feet from the jail in question on Court and Skirmerhorn Street. I'm primarily here today to talk to my neighbors. No disrespect to the other people in the room. Local opponents of a new facility have been disingenuous in their engagement. They have framed their opposition of the proposed jail in the language of social justice. But their own self-interest is the obvious motivation, as evidenced by their substantial investment of $11,350 in a professional lobbyist, who is sitting here today. When you start sentences with social justice or ending mass incarceration or any of those other phrases, but you end them with density, zoning, height, those words, it's incredibly disingenuous, and it drives me crazy. I grew up on the Lower East Side in a very low-income community. I did very well. I'm very happy. I'm very grateful to live in Brooklyn Heights. I love my neighbors, but we have to stop doing this. If you're upset about zoning, you're upset about height, be upset about zoning and height, but don't pretend that you care about the people who are locked up in Rikers Island, because it seems disingenuous to me, and we need to stop and think about it. And I know I'm probably triggering some white fragility. I have white fragility too, I understand, but stop for a second and think about the impact that your decisions and your own activism have had on people with a lot less power than you. And start from there and stop talking about FAR. FAR could be beds, it could be volume, it could be a million different things. You're conflating FAR and density and beds, and like these are all different things. And when you don't take this as seriously as the people whose lives are impacted, it is incredibly selfish, and I just urge you to just look within your own conscience. I'm done, thank you.
Okay, Justin Cohn, please.
My name is Albert St. Jean. I'm the organizer for the Black Alliance.
Not called that name yet, so can we stay in the order of the names called, please?
He seated his time.
Your name's in the pile. We'd like to, there's other people here. Please work with us, please. We'll get to you. We will get to you. I appreciate that. Thank you. So Justin Cohn, Abigail Cuniff, Amika Reyna. Thank you.
So, close to 100 years ago, this city was having the same
Can you start with
conversation.
your name, please?
Sorry, I'm Justin Cohen. About 100 years ago, this city was having the same conversation. It was about closing the jail on Blackwell's Island in favor of the one in Rikers. That was also a hellhole. And the promise was that by replacing it with something new, we would eradicate the hellhole. The problem with this argument is you cannot make a jail humane. And I am constantly mystified by the fact that the city keeps telling us that a plan to build 6,000 new cells is somehow decarceration. We need to close Rikers tomorrow. Rikers must be closed. We agree with you on this. We do. But you don't have to build 6,000 new cells for our neighbors in its place. I want to leave you with 3 words. One is people. How a city takes care of its people is how we should measure our public officials. Spending $11 billion to replicate and grow the criminal justice system is not taking care of people. Priorities. What would you do if you had $11 billion? Would you fix NYCHA? Would you fix schools? Would you fix transit? The last thing I would do is build 6,000 new cells for our neighbors. The last word I want to leave you with is progressive. The city has tried to sell this plan as progressive, and I understand why they're doing it, but it's a lie. There is no progressive way to reestablish the system of mass incarceration in this city for another generation. 100 years ago, they said they would close Blackwell's and replace it with something better. The something better was Rikers Island. Do not believe that we will replace Rikers Island with something better. Vote no on this plan, close Rikers, and build no new jails in this city. Thank you.
Okay, we have Abigail.
Hi, everyone. I wasn't sure about whether I should speak today. I'm here also to say that we need to be able to demand the full closure of Rikers right now, and that it be shut down immediately, and that nothing be built in its place, which is kind of hard to imagine in the political climate that we're in right now, which I understand. But I'm struggling because it seems like the words community justice, the word community funding, all these concepts have been brought over and kind of turned back against the people who are trying to advocate for people inside. And that's pretty painful and upsetting. Yeah, I mean, I think we should engage with it as an ideological dispute, not as like a bunch of other smaller things that are going on below it, and we should see it, the people who are at the table right now and the decision that's happening, and the people who are at the table have been the DOC commissioners for like 20, 30 years just developing this plan, maybe for like 50 years if you look at the Chinatown proposal. It's really scary to think about how other fights are getting brought into this, and how we're getting confused over, and we're all really concerned about Rikers, and we're all saying that people inside every jail is creating so much trauma and so much pain, and like, how do we respond to that, and do we want to commit ourselves? Do we want to say for the next 10 years, $11 billion is going to go to at least building 4 new jails, and maybe closing something, or maybe just having some shiny new facilities in addition to the ones that we already have? I'm going to say vote against this jail, and also shut down Rikers right now, and try to imagine a New York City that doesn't have any more incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambika Reina, before she speaks, I'd like to call the next 3 speakers: Nabil Hassan, Jordan Leon Atkins, and Ragini Sharif. Thank you.
Hi, I support the immediate closure of Rikers and no new jails, and here's why. The mayor claims that he will close Rikers in 2027. However, in 2027, Mayor de Blasio will not even be in office to close Rikers, and there is no legally binding document ensuring that Rikers will close. Also, the mayor claims closing Rikers is only possible if we build new jails. Ending broken windows policing would prevent tens of thousands of New Yorkers from going to jail or getting ticketed. Ending pretrial detention would reduce the daily jail population by an average of over 6,000 people. The mayor also claims having jails close to our communities will improve responses to inhumane conditions and family visitation. However, MDC Brooklyn, the Tombs, and Brooklyn House of Detention are neighborhood jails that, despite community outrage, have had inhumane conditions for years. Historically, whenever a new jail was built to improve conditions, the abuse of incarcerated people and their visitors persisted. The mayor also claims that this plan will help New York decarcerate. This plan will build 6,000 new cages, which have the capacity to incarcerate tens of thousands of people per year. If they build it, they will fill it. Neighborhoods near new jails will face increased surveillance, leading to more incarceration. The mayor advocates replacing cash bail with a system that would restrict more people from being eligible to leave jail pre-trial, increasing incarceration. Instead, let's use this $10 billion for safe and strong communities, end homelessness, strengthen NYCHA, transform mental health, guarantee the future with jobs and education, close Rikers now with no new jails.
So next speaker, Nabil Hassan. Did I get it close? Thanks.
Peace, everyone. My name is Nabil Hussain. I'm a member of No New Jails NYC. I've been a supporter of closing Rikers Island for years. I was part of a campaign to shut down Rikers in 2015 and 2016. And I just want to, in the short time that I have today, I just want to speak about some of the same things that Justin was speaking about, especially the fact that according to the mayor's office, this is designed as a multi-generational plan. Okay, so the mayor's office is coming out and telling us right now that they're planning to keep tens of thousands of our people, of my community members, in cages every year for generations to come. Okay, Rikers Island itself is already the better part of 100 years old, and like Justin said, when it was first being introduced and proposed, it was actually unveiled to an audience of social workers who were clapping and talking about how much better this would be than what their clients and their people had gone through before. And I see a very clear echo of that in all the service providers who've come to line up behind this plan. I don't believe that this plan will be any better. I don't believe that there is any such thing as a humane jail. I don't believe that we should be building thousands of new cages in New York City. A real plan for decarceration has to mean letting out people from jail, not building new ones. I think the city initially came out with a number of about 6,000 cages that they wanted to build to hold 5,000 people. They changed this number to 4,000. People are calling for even less, 3,000. I say keep going. Why not 2,000? Okay, why not 1,000? Why not 0? Why not imagine a future where incarceration is not the response to social problems? What can we actually imagine a future of real freedom in New York City? If this plan passes, that future will not come to pass for at least another generation. In the year 2100, these jails will still be standing, just as Rikers Island is still standing today. All right, we have to find a way to close Rikers Island without building any new jails. All right, shut down Rikers and no new jails.
Thank you. Jordan?
Hi, my name is Jordan Leanne Atkins. I'm a resident of Bushwick and also a member of No New Jails NYC, and I'm here to ask you and all city officials that you vote no on building new jails in New York. This administration has made specific investments, and those investments have been expanding the NYPD, increasing their budget year after year, and pushing tens of thousands of families into homelessness because they have sold out our communities to developers instead of building actual affordable housing and fixing NYCHA. Those are things that they could be doing. Those are decisions that they make, and we cannot divorce this plan that they're putting in front of us from those decisions that they've made. They have billions of dollars, which they're willing to commit to the development project for building new jails. Why are they not putting those billions into people and into our communities? As folks have said, why are they not investing in healthcare and housing and education and not doing those things in a jail, not in an institution of violence? New York City actually knows that it can close Rikers now through changes in policy, through changes in policing, but what it lacks is the political will. We can't accept this plan, and we can't dedicate the next century to more incarceration. We can and will close Rikers now, not in 10 years, and we will not replace it with new jails.
So before Regina speaks, I'd like to call the next three speakers. Calvin Mercoli Nelson, Tress Freeburn, and Carolyn Yao. Good, thank you.
Okay. My name is Ragini, and I'm a member of No New Jails campaign. As a Brooklyn community member, I speak out today against the city's jail expansion plan. We don't need jails. We don't need any more cages. The city's plan to build these jails will cost in excess of $10 billion. The plan would build 6,000 new cages, which would have the capacity to incarcerate tens of thousands of our communities. The plan does not require New York City to close Rikers after the new jails are built, effectively expanding New York City's jail system. And we know if they build it, they will fill it. We can invest in community needs such as housing and healthcare. Resourcing community needs instead of jails would move us towards a world where transformative justice is prioritized for all of us who are queer, black, brown, trans, non-binary, and all others who are regularly targeted by white supremacy. I ask our borough president to listen to our community today. We want no new jails.
Thank you. Calvin? Trez?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm just a resident of Brooklyn. I find a couple of things really alarming about the way that this is being talked about right now, specifically the urgency in which they're trying to get the community to sign on to something that clearly is not a solution. The proposed plan is just a transformation of what's already happening. There's no solution there. Okay, the Rikers should absolutely be closed. I think the thing that you have to ask yourself is, we have a housing crisis, and now we have a jail plan. We have an onslaught of gentrification, and now we have a jail plan. We have massive homelessness, and now we have a borough jail plan. So what's different? What's changed? What requires 4 new jails in our communities to deal with the runoff of human life from the pressures of these systems, right? To address what might happen when people who are affected by homelessness, that are affected by gentrification, that are affected by overcriminalization, are on the streets. What does that mean? That means there needs to be a closer way to cage them, okay? We have to ask the right questions. This is being pushed through right now with no kind of transparency, okay? No kind of actionable plan, all right? The only solution is to build more cages, okay? I understand that there's a lot of pain that's come from this institution. I have a lot of respect for the work that people have put in. But we got to be thinking a little bit more about the future. We got to be thinking a little bit more about better solutions than just opening up 4 new jails to just put more people. Okay, thank you.
Before Carolyn speaks, I'd like to call the next 3 speakers. Al St. John, Samantha Johnson, Joel Nathan.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Yao. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I want to make it clear that I oppose this plan on the basis that mass incarceration is a human rights abuse, and there is no cage here or anywhere in the city that can operate under justice. Under the system, incarceration brings trauma and terror to those incarcerated and their loved ones. But it brings profit to the companies selling essentials for ridiculous prices behind bars, the companies hiring incarcerated people for pennies an hour, and most notably profit to the private developers that de Blasio has on speed dial. So we have to understand these motivations. I will not believe that building 4 new jails is a form of decarceration or that the mayor cares about the incarcerated people at all. History tells us this. The testimonies from the formerly incarcerated people in our community also tells us the city has never blinked an eye at the level of neglect and abuse in jails. Instead of responding to all of the needs voiced loud and clear by us in the community daily for decades, the mayor's office decides $11 billion of our money should go to skyscraper jails with a shopping complex under it, with the same racist COs and cops in the system. The people have exhibited their leadership for decades and have proposed solutions for the horrific system of mass incarceration. Solutions include billions for NYCHA, our schools, transportation, healthcare. This is the stuff that keeps people from committing crimes of survival. There's no promise from the city to close Rikers. This proposal is just regarding the borough-based jail plan, and if this plan is approved, then the city's commitment to jails will continue for as long as we are living, even past that. The reality is that we can organize to close Rikers without new skyscraper jails, and we do not need jails in order to rehabilitate. We gotta end the cycles of mass incarceration now. So, the Borough President, we're here and we're watching your move. Do not move this plan ahead. Thank you.
Al, thank you very much for before.
Peace, everybody. My name is Al St. Jean. I'm with the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, also part of No New Jails NYC. So, as most of us here agree, Rikers Island has to close. That's without question. But the thing in this plan, when you're saying yes to this plan, you're not necessarily saying yes to closing Rikers Island. Because in this plan, there's no rush to close Rikers Island. There's only a rush to build 4 new facilities. There's only a rush to build 4 new jails, brick and mortar. If there was a rush to close Rikers Island, right now, Rikers Island has a capacity of, 17,000 with this 8,000 people on there. No parts of Rikers Island is closed, to my knowledge. And no, 1 building out of several that's still open. There's no guarantee that Rikers Island will close after Mayor de Blasio leaves. This plan is basically de Blasio kicking the can down the road because there's no accountability. How will we hold the next mayor accountable to close Rikers Island when there's no binding guarantee that Rikers Island will close? 80% of the people on Rikers Island haven't even seen a judge. Why don't we start there? How easy would it be for one to fight their case from home instead of having to plead guilty for something they didn't do just so that they could get home? If I'm in a nicer jail, if I'm in a more kinder, more gentler jail, what does that change if my family cannot eat because I'm not there to bring home the bread? If there are people in my family that have more of an economic burden because I'm gone, if I lose my job, what is a nice jail gonna do about that? And on top of that, why devote $11 billion to imagining jails instead of preventing incarceration in the first place? At the very moment that this is happening, NYCHA is going through the process of being privatized. A third of NYCHA will be under private management. Isn't that very coincidental to you? That at the same time we're talking about air rights and all of this stuff, and then this jail thing is coming up? And on top of that, the construction is being greenlighted before we even know any of the impacts of any reform taking place, before we know the impact of what it would be like to end broken windows policing, before we know what the impact would be like if we actually invested in our communities. We're doing this backwards. We're going for a pump fake. We're going for an okie doke. That's what this plan is.
Sum up, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Samantha?
Hello, my name is Samantha Johnson. I'm a Fort Greene resident, NYCHA resident, and also a member of No New Jails. The one thing that I do want to leave and request is that we vote the proposal of these jails down. But the reason is being because the proposal of a developer has already been given, and no public knowledge has been given to the community to let them know that $1.7 million has been already given to a developer that actually was part of the proposal in developing the Barclays Center. The Barclays Center actually had a humongous detrimental complications about a community agreement that still to this day, as Building 15 is being built, has not agreed to do anything according to their community agreement. Jobs were taken away from individuals. Actual businesses were given to developers. People are homeless because they don't have enough money, because their jobs have been taken away from them. And as we speak right now, P.C. Richards is fighting the Barclays Center and also the developer to ensure that they can keep their own land. Now, we are not a P.C. Richards, and we are not anything of that nature, but there are community members who are really, really emphasizing that if we cannot even assure that 80 Flatbush was going to be agreed upon, and those homes were actually decreased, and actually a building was raised, we cannot assure that Rikers is going to be closed down. Rikers actually is not a part of this proposal. It actually is something that's secondary that can be done separate, in which AOC and every other elected official has also said these things can happen without building 4 new jails. 4 new jails is actually going to spend more money than it would for the average budget for actual HRA. The current amount for public services and grants is actually $374,000. Other than in comparison of millions and billions of dollars are being given to a jail, to 4 jails. I can't get food stamps if I make a certain amount of money, and so individuals who have Rikers right now will come home needing services, and we rather spend on jails and not on our people. Thank you.
So Joel, Nathan, and then I'm going to call remaining speakers, Maya, Brittany Williams, MJ Williams, and June Gordon. And if there's other people here that would like to speak that have not filled out a slip, please do so. Thank you.
So I think the number is what? There's over 7 million people on probation, parole, or incarcerated in this country. I think that the way that this whole thing is being framed right now is bizarre, to say the least. How we're sitting in the mass incarceration capital of the world, and we're talking right now about building new jails, is absolutely beyond me. I think that after hearing a lot of the testimony from people, which is like, honestly, it's heart-wrenching, and I listen to it, and I hear you, and I hear, you know, about the conditions on Rikers and how terrible it is. And I do not, for one, think that exporting that to the boroughs is a good idea, which is what would happen. I think that a lot of the dialogue is being dressed up in like this really progressive language, how we can talk about mass incarceration and the legacy of slavery and how terrible it was. And I think it's just, we can't talk about that without also discussing the fact that prisons have maintained a function in this particular society, and it does not have anything to do with crime. It has to do with social control. And to think that somehow this new plan is going to be in any way different is inaccurate, to say the least, first and foremost. The people that are trying to speed this through, that is Mayor de Blasio and his corrupt administration that is firmly in the hands of developers, of Wall Street, and a whole lot of people that would very much wouldn't mind if a whole bunch of us were in cages to begin with. They're trying to speed this through under this language of closing Rikers, even though we know that it's not in the plan. We want to close Rikers yesterday, obviously. But we would be fools to believe that the same people that have decided to give so much money to the police every year have any interest whatsoever about rehabilitative justice for incarcerated people, for vocational services for incarcerated people, for making these new jails, these wonderful little playlands. Doesn't matter what you call it, a jail is still a jail. We could call it Ronald McDonald Funland, we could call it whatever we want, but they're torture houses and we should not put them in the boroughs, okay? Wow, that was fast. Okay, whatever. That's,
but you can always
vote no,
add additional remarks. Okay. So we're going to call Maya McDonald, Brittany Williams, MJ Williams, and June Gordon. If my colleagues could check on Assembly Member Joanne Simon, get an estimate perhaps of arrival.
Hey, so my name is Brittany Williams. I am a community member of Brooklyn. I used to work for Just Leadership USA. One thing I want y'all to know is we're all talking about the Lippman report, but what no one is talking about, the first recommendations of the Lippman report was close half of it in 30 years. So this whole idea around the Lippman report is this revolutionary plan. Fuck that. We worked really hard to push them to get there, right? To say close records. And also, Dana, it's the DOC sitting at the table with you. That's a real question. Right there. So when we have this idea around like, oh, the DOC will not be involved, they entrenched in this plan, y'all. That's the real shit that we all have to reckon with. The one thing that I will say is we know that these jails will institute our people to be in it. We know that records needs to close down. I marched, we did everything. Like, we can talk about the Free New York campaign, but before the Free New York, it didn't have a name. It was 2 people in that room who boldly thought of it, and I was one of them. Because what we wanted was our people to be free, home, with resources or whatever they needed to get to thrive. NYCHA, everyone on this board, the question that I have for you is literally 10, 20 years from now, when these jails come out more violent, because we know that the DOC, everybody has seen the reports in the articles that literally has come out that literally say the DOC has been hiding incidents across the boroughs, not just Rikers Island. This violence is entrenched in jails, period, and has always been. So when we're literally sitting up here talking about jails and building new jails, let's ask ourselves, we have our youth here. Do we want them there? When we know NYCHA, privatization. The mayor doesn't give a fuck about black and brown people when we literally say undocumented people, 1,700% since Trump been elected. ICE at the court, arrests have gone up. Surveillance, y'all, this will be more surveillance in our community. Yes, I will stop after I say this. We don't need no new jails. Use that money to fund our people and give us what I need without cages.
Okay. So MJ Williams, June Gordon, and then Eugenia Williams. Okay, so we have Eugenia Williams. And again, I have no other speakers, so if there are anybody else who didn't get a chance to speak that would like to speak, you could come up, fill out a slip. We appreciate that.
Hello, good evening all. My name is Eugenia Williams, and I am a Brooklyn resident living right here down the street, and I am a person that has spent time on Rikers Island. Now I work for the Fortune Society, bringing home those thousands of people returning home from incarceration each year. I'm here to tell you today that there's nothing about Rikers Island worth saving. It is a destructive and dehumanizing place. I am here today for everyone left behind there right now. I say left behind purposely. Rikers Island is over an hour away from here. We shove people away from our communities, making it difficult for families and supportive people to visit. We isolate people away from their attorneys and critical resources needed to ensure access to justice. We relegate them to a mega jail complex with poor design and a deep-seated culture of violence. While we work towards a society that can exist without prisons, one day, that day is not today. What the people advocating for no jails here today fail to consider that they're in New York, the penal law has a bail status known as the remand, which means until that is eliminated, we will need jails. So efforts must be first be focused on getting our society to a place where our entire legal system is not pre-educated on the confinement and perhaps a little more shifting public perception and reducing stigma, since many people here care more about the density and the height than people's lives. Building community jails is the only practical strategy that will Rikers Island to close building stronger communities. And please, can we please stop calling people incarcerated? These people incarcerated are NYC residents, our neighbors, and for many of us, our family, and they will be coming home. Thank you.
So I have no other speakers here. Again, last call on Donna Hilton, Barry Campbell, Tricia Lynch, Tiffany Chu, Nat Rubin, Calvin, Mercalia Nelson, Maya McDonald, MJ Williams, and June Gordon. So go on to...
Okay, if there are no other speakers, Richard, will you please close this item?
Calendar item number 1 is closed. We'll enter remarks from Assemblywoman Joanne Simon as soon as they're received for the record.
Okay. The hearing on this item is now closed. Thank you for participating in this public hearing. Borough President Adams will review the application we heard today and will soon submit his recommendations to the City Planning Commission. Borough President Adams would like to take this opportunity to remind you that the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on these items. The hearing is now adjourned. Borough President Adams would like to remind those viewing on the website that timely comments can be submitted by email at askeric@brooklynbp.nyc.gov.